Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
So, Antonio, a massive welcome to you.
Dennis, welcome. Thank you for hosting me here. It's a pleasure to be at your podcast. I heard great things about leadership is changing. And so, yes, I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Antonio, just let our listeners know, whereabouts are you in the world today?
Well, I'm from Spain. I spent quite some time there. Today, I'm in Brussels, Belgium, which is a bit of my hub as well. Brussels, Belgium, here in Europe.
Oh, Europe. So, yeah, wonderful. Great place to be. And so, must be nice and early in the morning for you as we go into the evening here. Now, Antonio, we've just given the listeners a brief introduction to you. Tell us a little bit more about your background. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
My background is very global. When I was a kid, I lived in many countries. My parents were moving from Spain to Mexico, to Italy, to Germany, so I've been raised very global, open mindset. I started to work in a tech company called Unisys in Amsterdam. Then I moved into consulting, big consulting. And since very early, I really enjoy working in projects. I had a day job, which was more a process analyst, processing orders, and I found that a bit boring. They asked me if I wanted to join a project, and I loved that. It was like every day was different. But still, I had my day job, which was processing orders. But at one point, I managed to move into projects, and I specialized in projects. I realized how difficult they were to manage, to make them successful. And that made me to think that if one project is difficult to manage, how do you manage 100 projects or 1,000? And that led me to researching. And one of the key points in my career was when I was fired from this big consulting firm where the senior partners told me, Antonio, we love your passion around projects and project management, but this is a boring topic. It's not something that we can sell. It's something that is tactical. It's not strategic, like marketing, R&D, branding, innovation, agile, all this stuff. And that was a trigger for me to say, I need to change that. I think projects are critical. Project management is critical for every leader to understand, to build the competencies. So this is a very long introduction, but this was a key moment to say, okay, I'm going to change that. I need to think, how can I make these senior leaders understand that their futures are their projects? And if they don't spend time on it, the future of their organizations is at stake. So a long story to just say that my passion started when I was fired. And I thank the partners for that. This is about 20 years ago. And from there, I kept working. I'm still a practitioner working banking for 7 years through the highs and the crash in 2007 and 8. Then I moved into pharma. Now I'm working on sustainability. But at the same time, I started to teach. I teach because I was a terrible student and I thought teaching has to be fun. Teachers have to be able to teach in a different way than just asking people to memorize books. So I've been teaching in business schools for also around 15, 20 years. And from there, I went into writing and I published last 6 months ago, just today, Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook, which was probably one of the greatest personal achievements for me, being published by HBR, so that finally senior leaders understand the importance of projects for their business, for themselves.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful news. And Harvard Business Review, brilliant. I think that's really good. And yeah, thankfully they did fire you when they did. So then you could actually do something about it and make it fun as well, which is important. Now, I noticed that we talked about before in the introduction that about central issues on every CEO's 2030 agenda. And I presume that's around project management and how it's important for organizations moving forward. Anything else you want to share about that?
Sure, I think there is an issue with the word project management. Sounds very tactical, shows engineering, IT. It's nothing that it's a fancy topic to call in a boardroom or an executive board. So I started to talk more about managing projects, managing your future through projects. And that's where people resonate. One of the biggest challenges that CEOs and senior leaders have today around the world is that they have more projects than employees because they have grown, they launch so many initiatives, especially in this time where change is so fast. Competition is so aggressive that you need to constantly evolve your business, your products. So you find out yourself with more projects than employees, and they still need to do their job. So I get a lot of calls from senior leaders saying, listen, how do I prioritize? How do I prioritize? I don't even know the number of projects that we have today, really. So I just don't know. It has become such a big issue where people don't really know the amount of projects they do, where the people work, what the investment they do, and especially what's the benefit that they're expecting to get from all these projects. So that's how it's becoming today. That's where I get a lot of questions is, can you please help me? I manage the operations. The operations are easy to manage. And most of it is automated today. And we have Lean Six Sigma and everything. But that part of the change world where we need to focus more today, it's just a black box and I need help. Please, Antonio, can you help us? So it's a bit more than just project management as we used to know it. It's more about
Mm.
working and leading an organization in a changing world, which is operations not so important anymore.
Yeah, cool. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because it is a changing world, which is great. Now, tell me something in relation to project management. I actually agree with you. I think it could have been a different title, could be whatever it is, but it's really important. And I find that a lot of actually project management, program management, and things like that, a lot of the guys who are the leaders of those projects or initiatives or whatever they are, people don't have a solid line direct into them. They don't report into them. It's more of a matrix organization, a dotted line, and they may be coming in for that project work. So I think, in my view, and I would love to hear what you think about this, Antonio, is that I think that being a leader of a project is more important than a person who's a direct leader. What do I mean by that? Because you have to be more influential. They don't report to you. Their compensation and benefits aren't associated with you. And so you have to be more influential to get them to do things. What's your thoughts on that?
I totally agree, Denis. I think what makes it interesting but challenging is when they ask you, can you lead this transformation? It goes across the organization. And previously, maybe you had an operating team or a marketing team or finance team. That I would see more as a management role, right? Is you manage day-to-day operations, day-to-day activities. It's just putting targets for the people. You see them every day. So that's for me is the management of the operational world, which in the past was 80-90% of the activities in a business. Today, with the automation, robots, operation shrinks radically. So what you find out today is most people working project based, and leadership is where it comes into play here because is what you say then is, wow, these people don't report to me anymore. I don't see them every day. I have conflicts with resources. That person, which is key for my project, is working in 3 other projects and has no time. People change their mind with what they wanted. So suddenly I need to start thinking about how I can influence the organization in a different way, how I can influence my team, which doesn't report to me, and I cannot reward it. There's very few organizations who reward people for success in their projects. KPIs, rewards are mostly operational driven. So how can I make them excited for them? Yet I don't have any means to compensate them. Just words and just caring and just motivating to get better in their jobs. And then a big part where I focus a lot is I also need to lead and influence my bosses, right? When you have in an operation role, you just follow orders. They come from the top. But here, no, I need to tell a CEO sometimes, listen, you're not doing your job, CEO, because you're not showing up in my meetings. You want this project to happen, then you need to be there. Really, I need you. So it just changes completely leadership. So I really like when I heard your podcast is it's just spot on. It's leadership has to change. if you want to succeed in today's world.
Thank you, Dennis. It's lovely to be here, and I really appreciate you bringing me on the show. So yeah, let's just jumping as I say, my Marvel character backstory. Because for anybody who is a superhero nerd myself, every character, whether it's a hero or a villain, always has some kind of backstory that makes them who they are. So anyway, the way that my backstory goes is that I was about 20 years into a corporate career, right? I was in the technology industry, came out of undergrad in finance, got my MBA, basically did everything exactly the way that a good Gen Xer like me was supposed to do it. Was right through college, managed to get through with no debt, got into a corporate job, got them to pay for the MBA, bought a house, bought a car, bought a bigger house, kid, bigger house, another kid, all that stuff. But then 20 years in, what had happened was I was running the program management office for another tech company. I'd actually switched from one role to another, but that's fine. And then one day the person who hired me, he elected to do early retirement, which for people who are not familiar with corporate life, anytime somebody says early retirement, that means that somebody was paid to leave. That means they were told, okay, you don't have a job here anymore, but if you leave right now, we'll give you money. Otherwise you get nothing. And people say they're going to take early retirement. And then half the time they end up going and doing something else. Okay, the guy who hires me takes early retirement. New CIO, chief information officer, comes in from the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area. And he was around for about a month or so. We started doing the, hey, everybody's dial in to the meetings. And then one day I get a 30-minute meeting on my calendar with about an hour's notice and no subject. And I go, okay, this is weird. Okay, whatever. I log in. And then he says, as we have budget constraints, so your position's being eliminated today. And so then HR comes on the line and says, all right, so we are sending a severance package to your personal email, and we're going to be FedExing out a box for you to pack up your laptop and send it back here. And then shortly after that, about 3 to 5 minutes, my network access was cut off. So April 20th, 2020, I'm now unemployed, just like 40 million other people in the US. And after that, I ended up putting in somewhere between 300 and 400 job applications. Ghosted. Nothing. I think after a rather elaborate string, I think I ended up going through 2 interview cycles with pretty major companies. In both cases, I got close, but not close enough. And this is one of the things that I just think is so funny / broken about the way that traditional interview processes go, is that, for example, there would be a requisition out there for a finance manager. I go, okay, I'm one of 150 people who apply. I go, okay, so they decide to talk to me. I go through 3 rounds. They're hiring 2 people, and I'm like number 4. They go, oh, sorry, you didn't make it. You're out. Okay, why did you go through all of that effort? Because if you're getting people down to, say, a top 8, top 10, and they've gone through that many hoops, chances, and you're a big company, which it was, there's some place in your company that they can create value. Why are you wasting all of that time in screening people just to say, oh, sorry, you didn't make the cut, you're off, go back out on the street. But anyway, neither here nor there. What I ended up doing after that was I really sat down and thought, okay, I can either keep doing this, because eventually I'll find something. I can keep doing this, but wherever I end up, I'm going to be looking at 3 to 5 years to prove myself. Because anytime you go to a new company, new team, whatever, it's going to take a few years for whoever the major decision makers are to really trust you. Like people, they'll give you some assignments. You'll have a few things here or there, but it's going to take years to really get someone to where they trust you enough to where you'll get major responsibilities, which is what makes you ascend. So my thought was, okay, if I'm looking at, if my clock is set for 3 to 5 years anyway, I might as well spend that time putting something together on my own. And I may make it in 3 to 5 years. It may take longer than that. I may go through a lot of heartache and gymnastics, all of which have happened. But I was like, okay, I've really always wanted to do my own thing, but I've been terrified by the idea of losing my corporate paycheck. I go, okay, the corporate paycheck is gone anyway, so let's just figure it out. And so one of the things I ended up doing after that was I ended up starting out an expense reduction consulting business. And so the upshot there is that what I do is I work with companies to reduce their contract-based expenses. And I do that on a success fee basis so that there is no upfront cost, which is an awesome business model. The flip side is that the lead time for renegotiating contracts and then billing for savings is extremely long. That was one of those things where if you're going into this business, you either need to have an enormous cash position or you need to have some kind of side hustle that generates more immediate income. which is where I got into where I'm at, my other side hustle I'm doing right now, in addition to my podcast called Terminal Value, which is I'm also doing business development for an IT recruiting and managed services company. And so what all of this kind of works its way into, and also I'm also working with 2 pre-revenue startups in terms of working with them on putting their business model architecture together and figuring out how they're going to be financing and structuring their capital deals. But what all this really turns into is that my life went from there's a corporate track, put money in your 401k, save so that at some point you can stop working and be able to pay to essentially do nothing for the remainder of your natural life, to now I'm on an entrepreneurial journey of juggling as many balls as I can possibly imagine, interviewing people for my podcast, and then figuring out how to pivot my way to a successful business, which may or may not look like what I'm currently doing.
Yeah. Well, what a start, listeners. Doug, that's awesome. So 3 to 5 minutes and they cut off your internet. That's your access there. That's to the organization. Crazy. And I thought, how many years ago would have that been? But that's only been recently.
Yeah.
Doug, you shared some really cool things here in the sense of transitioning from the corporate world into, say, your own business and things like that. How long after you left that corporate role to you actually starting your own business? How long did it take you?
That was about 3-4 months.
Okay. And those 3-4 months, that transition, I find that actually quite fascinating, that period of time for a lot of people, because there is so much that goes through people's minds. How did you find that transition?
Of course, right. The part that's really difficult is that when you are not engaged in some sort of employment for which you're being paid, there's a tendency to feel like you don't really have any value.
Yep.
Now, of course, doing my own thing now, one of the things that I keep thinking back on is how, I'm like, I spent a whole lot of time being paid as a corporate employee, irregardless of whether what I did that day created any value or not. Because one of the first things you learn when you're running your own business is that there's no such thing as paid vacation. The only way that anything happens is if you do it.
Yep.
And the whole notion of, I'll just barely do enough for today and I'll knock off early today. And I'm going to go out on a vacation. You can do all those things. But by the way, any time that you are not investing, you're not making money.
Yep.
And so I think there's as they would say, there's the hunt, kill, repeat that is the way that life works, especially as you're in the very beginning of running a business. As you get more mature, you can start implementing processes, you start getting staff, all that kind of stuff. But when you're starting out, right, you have to go through what I call the swamp. And the swamp is you start at one edge and say, I have a business. And then you have to get to, I'm able to pay my bills. Those two things don't happen at the same time. And so what ends up happening is you end up having to meander your way through this swamp of figuring out, how do I either get financing or bootstrap and side hustle, or figure out how to finance my business to the point where the revenues that are coming in are adequate to pay my business expenses, plus living expenses, plus hopefully something additional. That doesn't happen on day one.
Yeah, you're right. And totally. And I think what I talk about, how you're saying about the value, I actually think that for me, it was more about a lot of people, they don't belong to something anymore. And for some of them, that's their whole identity is around that role or that organization. And that's not who they are. But the thing is, they think that's who they are. And they no longer belong to something. And so that transition is hard. It takes a different mindset. You're calling it the swamp as the thing, but it does take a different mindset to go through it as well, because I think the big thing for a lot of people is that first month of not that salary dropping into their bank account. That's where they go, whoa, and they feel like, now I'm out here on my own.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.